Your response initially to the decision from the president to sign this executive order today, you must be very pleased.
Well, Julia, my reaction is I really appreciate the pressure by so many in this country and around the world to highlight that this has been an abhorrent, immoral practice to separate children from their mothers and fathers. Two, clear that the president misled the American people about what he was required to do. But he's created a crisis that I'm still very distraught about. And he's trying to push us to two false choices, that either we separate children or we do mass incarceration. And while his reflection about the pressure by now having an executive order that I have yet to see, I am still incredibly concerned about what's about to occur on the House floor tomorrow that's being perpetuated by the president, which is we're now going to incarcerate these children with their parents, which goes against every moral and well-being issue that we know is in the best interest of these children.
Congressman, you mentioned the vote tomorrow in the House. Where do you stand now on the compromise bill that's being presented by the Republicans? Is there enough in there to convince you that this is the right way forward? And what more do you need to see if not?
Well, the one thing I need to just remind viewers is this is not a compromise bill. This is the president's bill that he actually couldn't get through moderate Republicans to start with. That's why we had just fiscal conservatives who are really interested in anti-immigration bills. So here's what we have. It perpetuates this false choice that we must incarcerate and detain families who are seeking asylum. It still commits real harm to children. It doesn't protect dreamers. We've got a report that shows that 82% of dreamers will not be helped by this bill, and it hits all the red lines for the minority caucuses in the Democratic caucus, including building a wall, family separation, non-family reunification, interior enforcement. It does everything that we were supposed to be compromising away from, and here we are, just where we started.
Congresswoman, you said that this whole debate presents a false choice. What are the other choices? Because this is an issue that this administration is not alone in grappling with. This has been a really persistent problem of how to process these folks who come across the border. What's the solution? What's the better way to do it?
There's at least three things they should be doing immediately. One, they should restore the funding that was really having an impact in the Northern Triangle. Most people are fleeing countries where there are no options for them. If your choice is your child being murdered by gangs or drug cartels or fleeing to the United States, we have to do something about that issue there. Two, you have to provide visas on the front end and real asylum mechanisms for people to make their credible fear cases, and we aren't doing that. We're actually keeping you from coming to ports of entry. When you come into a port of entry, we're detaining and incarcerating you. That's not how this is supposed to occur. And three, as we're catching up, we should be hiring and funding immigration lawyers and judges and advocates. We know how to create a safe space for families while they make these credible allegations of fear so that we know how to process folks. We do not have to build private prisons and incarcerate individuals for legally trying to get asylum in this country, and that's what we're doing.
You know, immigration is clearly a very politically sensitive subject, but we can't escape the fact that for the Republicans, it was also a presidency winning subject. Do you think ultimately that the images that we've seen, and some of them are pretty devastating, I think, actually, plays well for the Republicans in the midterms, or do you think actually they've damaged themselves in the handling of this current situation?
I do think it did provide voters, right, Americans with real images about what's occurring. And it flies in the face of the president's rhetoric about everybody coming south of the border as being a murderer, gang member, and rapist. And when you see a 3 or 4-year-old little boy or girl crying out for their mother or father, these are the images that all too often members of my caucus and immigration experts have shown us. And there are so many other really serious issues that we need to address. it makes it very difficult, I think, now for Republicans to say this was all in the interest of border and national security. I want border security. I want the drug cartels and gangs and coyotes and violent offenders who try to use the border to infiltrate those nefarious practices, including human trafficking, in this country. I want them stopped. But I am not going to hold innocent families as hostages to make that case. We don't need to do that. And I think they're going to be asked to explain how they allowed this White House to put them in this corner. And I hope maybe today, after this interview and a series of others, Republicans will reject these false choices and this false premise.
Congresswoman, you are running for governor of New Mexico as well. What remedies do folks have on the more local basis? What remedies do states have? What remedies would you have if you do indeed become governor of New Mexico to try to repair some of what's going on at the border? Or is it more of a federal solution?
It is clearly, to solve it, it has to be done at the federal level. But states can create two environments. One, you're not complicit, just like all the governors that are now bringing back their National Guard troops because they aren't doing anything. There isn't a credible, serious threat at the border that requires that intervention. If there is, well, that's a practical response, but that's not what's occurring. So as governor, I would hold that environment. I would not use the National Guard for political purposes. Two, I would do everything in my power to keep productive open trade with Mexico, so a wall is not in our best interest. And three, to help dreamers and mixed status families, states can create licensing and work requirements that help. They don't solve, right, the dreamer and immigration status, the mixed status of families, but they can provide some redress so that while the feds are trying to fix it, we provide as many protections as possible. And actually, I would do a fourth thing as governor. We need more immigration judges and lawyers so that we are fairly addressing this crisis. And I would join governors, all the southern border governors, to do something about the Northern Triangle so we don't have this migration problem to start with.